So we were talking about causes of deforestation at the end of the first lecture, and definitely wanting to highlight what's going on in the Amazon. Huge, huge global problems. That will have global repercussions because of, again, this loss of ability to hold water, carbon dioxide, the oxygen production. All these ecological values to that rainforest are being lost. So that's a struggle and a challenge. How do you convince the government of Brazil not to encourage deforestation? Because they're trying to increase their economy. They're trying to raise more food for their citizens, grow their domestic exports. So then the country now has a higher revenue stream to afford to improve the lives of their citizens, but it's at a global consequence. So we're going to talk about how do we try to manage this when we're in the United States and work with countries that have these resources that we don't want destroyed. But we need to identify other reasons for deforestation. So again, primary reason, cutting it down to convert it to agriculture. There's also large-scale commercial logging. And it's not so much applying to the Amazon, but other forests. We go to Canada, to the boreal forests, pines, those conifer trees and pines and all those trees, cut them down. We need lumber, we need building materials, we need wood products. There's a big drive to deforest areas to get those products so then we can continue to build and develop and do all these things. Fires are part of deforestation. Fires happen naturally. Sometimes these fires are natural and they burn thousands and thousands of acres of rainforest. The fires in the Amazon right now, those are not natural. Those are intentionally set to deforest it, to convert the land again for agriculture and other uses. So then the other box here or line to mention is, why else do we deforest the world's forests? Development. Let's take down the forests to make room for development so we can build a subdivision, build a whatever. Maybe we're expanding the city and the town is getting larger and you need more room, so you push into the forest. So lots and lots of reasons, unfortunately, for deforestation. And if we're going to try to decrease deforestation, we have to tackle the main cause and find ways to address that. But here's the overall picture when we look at deforestation. The good news. This isn't a guarantee, but this is the general picture. More developed countries, United States, parts of Western Europe, parts of Eastern Asia, parts of Asia, we're seeing actually a gain in forests. We're seeing reforestation programs. Let's replant, reforest. So overall picture, we're seeing this. Local picture may be different than an overall, but the good news is more developed countries are gaining forests. The bad news, less developed countries are losing forest cover. We're seeing a decrease in forest cover when we look at all of the majority of the less developed countries in the world. So you look at the Amazon in Brazil, you look at Central American countries, you look at African countries, you look at most of those oceanic countries, they're losing forest cover. So we have to try to figure out, how do we balance this out? They're losing forest cover because they're trying to grow and increase their economy. Well, we did the same thing 200 years ago in the United States. We're now rebuilding our forests. The struggle is we can't wait for Brazil to grow its economy and in 200 years reforest parts of the Amazon, because generally once it's gone, it's not coming back the way it used to be. So this is a struggle. This is the overall picture has to be looked at when we're trying to deal with a global issue. So again, we look at the global issue, but we then try to tackle it maybe at the local level, things like that. So forests have protection. There are laws, there are conservation programs, there are protected areas. Roughly, let's see, it's about, and this number, again, it's a moving target. This just gives us a general picture, but about 12.5% of the world's forests are in protection. Now, that sounds like, okay, that's okay. You know, that's kind of good. Because it's in protection doesn't always mean it is truly protected. It may be protected on paper. They call these paper parks. Like, here's the boundaries. Okay, nobody should cut these trees down. But is there enforcement? In developed countries, there tends to be more enforcement. You guys go to Washington Park and cut down an oak tree, you're probably going to have some problems. They're going to ask you why, what's going on, was it approved? You may get fined, you may go to jail. You do that in Central America, nobody's going to question that. They don't have the same level of enforcement, and that becomes a challenge. So even though we say 12.5% of the world's forests are in protection, it doesn't necessarily mean they are actually actively protected. So what is one possible solution or one possible method to help work with protection and work with maintaining forests is this thing called a debt for nature swap. So the way this works, more developed countries buy bonds. So we spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on bonds. And less developed countries will, ran out of room there. A less developed country will make an agreement and say, okay, let me change that. There we go. That way it fits. And say, okay, we'll protect 2,000 acres of forest in exchange for a $2 million bond. They get the bond. Basically, they're getting paid to protect their forest. And they use the money to improve the lives of their citizens, to get maybe resources, healthcare, education, whatever it may be for their country in exchange for protection of the forest. So sounds like a good deal. Challenge here is, will people in, or governments in more developed countries buy these bonds? Are they willing to do that? Will the less developed countries truly protect the forests? Is there monitoring? Is there enforcement of the agreements? So it's a great idea. In principle, it could work to do a lot of good, but the practicality is it doesn't always work. You know, if a more developed country, their economy starts going downhill, they're not going to have the revenue to spend on bonds. They're going to say, you know what, that's not a priority. We need to spend our money on other things. So then the less developed countries can't get bonds to exchange for forest protection. And they may say, well, forget it. We're not going to protect anymore. So it's a good idea. It has great intents. It could have great possible outcomes. But reality sets in, and it's not always a guaranteed thing. So sometimes private donations are more valuable than things like this. The challenge is the scale of the private donation. Can you get millions of dollars built up in private donations to support these things? So again, those are just some significant challenges with the debt for nature swaps. So again, not a bad idea, not downing it at all, but difficult to follow through with on a large scale for a long term. So, all right. Now we generally talk about tropical rainforests and focus on those. Well, temperate rainforests are also threatened. So in the US, let's go out to California, Oregon, Washington. We can jump up into Alaska. You can see other parts of the world where we have temperate rainforests. They are under threat as well. It's not just the tropical ones in those developing countries in the equatorial zones. Now, temperature rainforests, they face all sorts of threats just like the tropical. So let's start thinking about threats to what's going on with California's forests. Logging, that's a problem. Logging for development, logging for wood products, logging for whatever it may be. Fires, we hear about this every year in California, that fires sweep through the area and burn large sections of it. Drought, yeah, California just came out of a 10-year drought. That was a huge issue. Drought then contributes to fires and the problems associated with fires or with droughts. Climate change. This is going to be a constant ongoing issue associated with or threat to temperate forests, along with every other ecosystem on the planet. And we could also throw in there insect infestations. Sometimes these are invasive species that come in and just wreak havoc on a forest. Emerald ash borers. Look those guys up when we're talking about Illinois and Midwest. Midwest forests are under threat from the emerald ash borer and all these other invasive insects that can come over and just decimate forests. Large sections of forests in Belize, what's called the mountain pine ridge, were just wiped out by this beetle about 15 years ago, and the forests still haven't recovered. They just, hundreds and hundreds of acres of pine trees destroyed by a beetle. Saw the same thing down in the Smoky Mountains decades ago, and it takes years and years and years for these forests to recover, if they can ever recover. So we have significant challenges facing all the forests of the world. And what we want to think about at the local level is, what can we do here? Now, can we be conscious of our purchases and buy things that don't contribute to that? Yes. Become more aware, become more educated. Again, a simple one, palm oil. Look for products that don't have it. That decreases the reliance on palm oil. That means they don't need as many plantations. The consumer plays a big role in this. What about when you're at that point in life where you're going to build a house? Are you going to use wood? Are you going to use steel? Are you going to use recycled materials? If we're going to remodel, can we do it where we minimize the use of wood products? That decreases deforestation. So there's just lots of things we can do at a local level that has a bigger impact, that will influence deforestation, hopefully decrease deforestation, instead of our consumer habits increasing deforestation. Don't buy the cheap burger because it's coming from a country where they deforested the rainforest to grow the cattle to sell suppliers cheap meat. Buy something that the meat's grown locally. Significant difference there in the impact we will have. Okay, so things to think about when we talk about forests and when we talk about landscape preservation and management. Now, the other major biome for us to explore and take a look at will be the grasslands. Now, grasslands make up about 27% of the Earth's land surface. So a little bit bigger than the forests, but not much. And we have temperate grasslands, we have tropical grasslands, we call them prairies versus savannas, things like that. When we look at the grasslands, there's a large biodiversity found in the Earth's grasslands. And the problem is the majority of it has been, the majority of grasslands has been converted to agriculture. Because remember the feature of this biome, of grassland biome, thick, rich, organic soil, moderate temperatures, decent amount of rainfall, perfect farming conditions. That's why most of the Midwest is agriculture, because it used to be grasslands prior to the European settlement of the United States. So we're going to talk about grasslands in the next lecture and take a look at what's going on there, and we'll drill down and look at what's happening in Illinois.